On an otherwise ordinary April morning in 2025, the world was rocked by a seismic announcement. Amazon, the global e-commerce titan, revealed it would relocate its North American headquarters from Seattle and Arlington to Toronto, Canada. The news sent shockwaves through the business world, as few had anticipated such a bold and unprecedented move from one of America's most influential companies. Amazon's official statement cited the need for a more centralized logistics hub, improved access to global talent, and a desire to position itself at the heart of North American trade. Executives pointed to Toronto's thriving tech ecosystem, its multicultural workforce, and its strategic location as key factors in the decision. The announcement blindsided not only financial markets but also politicians, business leaders, and the general public. Investors scrambled to assess the impact, while newsrooms buzzed with speculation and disbelief. In Seattle and Arlington, employees and local officials were left reeling, while in Toronto, city leaders celebrated what they called a historic win. Economic analysts immediately began debating the long-term consequences for both countries. President Donald Trump's response was immediate and explosive. Viewing Amazon's move as a direct betrayal of his America First agenda, Trump unleashed a barrage of furious posts on Truth Social, accusing the company of abandoning American workers and vowing severe consequences for what he called economic treason. That very evening, in a hastily arranged address from the White House, Trump declared an economic emergency. He announced the immediate implementation of the Patriot Tariff, a sweeping set of import duties specifically targeting Amazon's supply chains and cross-border operations. These tariffs were a direct act of retaliation, bypassing normal legislative processes and enacted through executive order. The move stunned lawmakers and set a new precedent for presidential intervention in corporate affairs. The world watched in disbelief as a single corporate decision spiraled into a full-blown international economic crisis. Global markets tumbled, and governments scrambled to respond to the rapidly escalating situation. Amazon's move was the spark. Trump's reaction was the gasoline, igniting a firestorm of chaos with unpredictable and far-reaching consequences for the global economy. To understand the chaos, we need to grasp tariffs. A tariff is a government tax on imported goods, making them more expensive and encouraging consumers to buy domestic products. Tariffs can protect local industries, generate government revenue, or serve as leverage in international disputes. In trade wars, countries use tariffs to punish each other, hoping to force policy changes. But tariffs often backfire. The cost is usually passed to American importers, who then raise prices for consumers. This leads to inflation, squeezing household budgets. Tariffs also hurt American businesses that rely on imported materials, raising their costs and making them less competitive. Retaliation from other countries can further damage exports and jobs. In short, tariffs are a risky economic weapon that can trigger a damaging chain reaction. The day after the Patriot tariff announcement, financial markets plunged into chaos. The news sent shockwaves through trading floors across the globe as investors and analysts tried to make sense of the sudden sweeping changes. The Dow dropped over 1,500 points in an hour. The Nasdaq and S&P 500 tumbled, erasing months of gains. The sell-off was relentless, with billions of dollars in value wiped out in a matter of minutes. Automated trading systems, programmed to respond to volatility, amplified the panic. As headlines about the 145% tariffs on electronics, apparel, and other Chinese imports flashed across screens, investors scrambled to react, triggering a cascade of sell orders that deepened the rout. Pharmaceutical tariffs sparked fears of rising medicine costs. Pharmacies and hospitals worried about shortages, while patients wondered if they'd soon be paying much more for essential drugs. Investors, spooked by the unpredictability, fled to U.S. Treasury bonds, driving yields to historic lows. The rush to safety was immediate, as uncertainty gripped the market and traditional safe havens became more attractive than ever. The dollar swung wildly as global investors tried to assess the fallout. Currency markets became a battleground, with traders betting on which economies would weather the storm and which would falter. The VIX Fear Index soared, signaling deep anxiety about the future. Volatility reached levels not seen since the last major financial crisis, as uncertainty about the administration's next move kept everyone on edge. The market's reaction wasn't just about numbers, it was a loss of confidence in U.S. leadership and economic stability. Boardrooms across America filled with anxious discussions, as executives and employees alike questioned what would come next. Businesses and investors braced for a prolonged period of trade disputes and possible recession. The threat of layoffs, closures, and shrinking profits loomed large, casting a shadow over the economic outlook. The administration's impulsive move had turned a corporate relocation into a global financial crisis. The world watched as the ripple effects spread, leaving uncertainty and fear in their wake. For businesses, the tariff shock was immediate and brutal. Practically overnight, the rules of the game changed, leaving owners and managers scrambling to adapt. The uncertainty was not just financial, it was emotional too, as livelihoods and years of hard work suddenly hung in the balance. Small retailers selling on Amazon and eBay saw their costs skyrocket overnight, forcing impossible choices: absorb losses, cancel orders, or raise prices and risk losing customers. Many had to rethink their entire business models, questioning whether they could even survive in this new environment. Some tried to negotiate with suppliers, while others desperately searched for new sources of inventory. Uncertainty paralyzed planning. How do you set prices when tariffs can change with a tweet? Business owners found themselves glued to the news, trying to anticipate the next move. Forecasting became nearly impossible, and long-term strategies were replaced by day-to-day survival tactics. Some rushed to stockpile goods, straining warehouses. Others froze operations and laid off staff. The fear of running out of inventory led to panic buying, while the risk of overstocking meant tying up precious cash. For many, the only option was to cut costs, often at the expense of their workforce. Larger chains like Walmart and Best Buy, built on global supply chains, scrambled to find alternatives, but shifting production takes years. Even with their resources, these giants faced delays, higher expenses, and the challenge of maintaining customer trust. The complexity of their operations made quick fixes nearly impossible. Manufacturers using Chinese components faced soaring costs, making their American-made products less competitive. Some tried to redesign products or source parts from other countries, but these solutions were costly and time-consuming. The pressure to innovate was relentless. The ripple effects hit every sector, exposing the fragility of global supply networks. From electronics to clothing, delays and shortages became common. Consumers too began to feel the impact as prices rose and products disappeared from shelves. Trade lawyers and customs brokers were inundated as companies sought clarity. Navigating the maze of new regulations and paperwork became a full-time job, with many businesses relying on experts just to keep up. The tariff crisis revealed just how vulnerable businesses are to sudden, politically driven disruptions. It was a wake-up call, forcing companies of all sizes to rethink their strategies, build resilience, and prepare for a world where change can come without warning. Washington erupted in partisan warfare over the tariffs. Trump and his allies framed the move as a bold stand for American jobs, willing to endure short-term pain for long-term gain. Populist Republicans cheered the disruption, blaming free trade for middle-class decline. Democrats, led by Chuck Schumer, condemned the tariffs as reckless, accusing Trump of punishing Americans for a personal feud. They demanded hearings and investigations into possible insider trading. Pro-business Republicans broke ranks, warning that tariffs are taxes on consumers and would damage confidence. The GOP split between protectionists and free traders, deepening party divisions. The political battle became a clash of economic ideologies with the nation's stability at stake. The chaos in Congress mirrored the turmoil in the markets. America's economic future was now hostage to political infighting. The impact of tariffs hit Americans where it hurt most, their wallets. Retailers passed on the new import taxes, sending prices for phones, sneakers, toys, and TVs soaring. A $500 laptop now cost over $700, not for new features but because of tariffs. Inflation spiked, hitting lower and middle-income families hardest. Shoppers cut back or panic bought, creating shortages and more anxiety. Businesses, squeezed by costs, began layoffs. Workers in logistics and manufacturing faced job insecurity. The crisis became a kitchen table issue. Families worried about affording essentials and keeping their jobs. The link between political decisions and daily life was suddenly, painfully clear. Millions faced tough choices in a more expensive, uncertain world. Across America, reactions to the tariff crisis were deeply divided. In the Midwest, many cheered Trump's tough stance, seeing tariffs as a chance to revive local jobs, even if it meant higher prices. They blamed global corporations for abandoning American workers and saw the chaos as necessary change. In coastal cities and suburbs, anxiety and frustration dominated. Small business owners feared ruin, feeling like pawns in a political game. Confusion reigned as people struggled to make sense of conflicting narratives about tariffs. Family dinners and online forums buzzed with debate. Was this bold leadership or reckless self-sabotage? The nation was left on edge, divided and uncertain about the future. The only certainty was that life had become more unpredictable. The crisis exposed deep rifts in how Americans view trade, jobs, and the role of government. The tariff shockwaves quickly went global. China condemned the US for economic bullying and threatened retaliation, escalating the trade war. European leaders, blindsided, warned of new EU tariffs and questioned America's reliability as a partner. Canada, Amazon's new HQ host, tried to stay neutral but braced for fallout. Other nations like Vietnam watched nervously, fearing they could be next. The crisis strained alliances and pushed countries to seek new trade deals without the US. The World Trade Organization was powerless to intervene. The era of predictable American-led global trade was suddenly in doubt. Countries scrambled to protect their economies from US volatility. The global order, built over decades, now seemed dangerously fragile. As the dust settled, America faced hard lessons. The crisis exposed how vulnerable the global economy is to political shocks and impulsive decisions. It revealed deep divisions over trade and America's role in the world. The future will require tough negotiations, resilient supply chains, and a more deliberate, transparent approach to policy. Businesses will rethink their global strategies, likely leading to a more fragmented world economy. The real lesson: economic stability depends on trust, between parties, with business, and among nations. Without it, the risk of another self-inflicted crisis remains high. America's next steps will shape not just its own future, but the world's.